Hey, it's Glenys here. Today we're going to talk about how and when to introduce trot poles. Okay, so remember I'm Glenys from Horse Chats. Horse Chats is where we interview equine industry experts. It's a podcast on iTunes and many of your other podcast channels, also on the Play Store and on the Google App Store. Okay, and I suppose wherever you listen to your good podcasts. Also from International Horse College, where we've got government accredited qualifications within the equine industry. So if you're interested in that, have a look at internationalhorsecollege.com. Now today we're going to talk about introducing trot poles, how and when to introduce trot poles. Probably best that I talk to you about when to introduce trot poles before I talk to you about how to introduce the trot poles. So the trot poles, or nothing above ground level, should be taught until someone's cantering. Okay, they should be able to canter, pull up their horse, have control of the horse in the canter. But as far as trot poles go, they can be introduced fairly early, as soon as the rider can walk and trot independently. Okay, they can walk and trot, usually in a group lesson. They're going around, they can stop the horse, turn the horse, guide the horse, ask the horse to go walk, trot, ask the horse to go trot, walk, halt, all of those transitions. And if they're happy and familiar with that and, you know, doing a few figures in the arena and turning and guiding, then they're pretty right to go into trot poles here. Okay, now trot poles can be used as a dressage exercise, but we're going to talk about it being used as an introduction to jumping today. So generally, not always, generally you would teach your riders how to do your 2 and 3 point seat as well. Now sometimes you might get riders that aren't quite as fit and able to maintain that 2 and 3 point seat as what you'd like, but you can sort of introduce it in the lesson, you know, like do it. You don't want to do it just over the trot poles because you want them to be in the habit of getting it established. You know, the corner before the trot poles, they should be in 2 point seats, so you're not adjusting things just as you come into the trot poles, just as the same as you wouldn't want to adjust things as you come into a jump. So the first thing is when. Okay, we talked about when. I think you're pretty right there. Once the rider's turning and guiding, the next thing is the distance. Okay, now generally you'd say, between 1.2 and 1.4, and that's pretty textbook. You're going to get some big, extravagant jumping horses, possibly going over 1.4, but in that riding school beginner rider situation, you need to have them more at the 1.2 or less. Now you're going to get some ponies that are even going to come in and do less than a metre. So you've got to have a good look and develop your eye. Make sure the distance suits the horse. You don't want the beginner horse, stretching out too much. Okay, if it's stretching out too much, it's just got to be comfortable for the rider. Okay, so think about the distance and think about the horse placing its leg evenly. So if you've got your 2 trot poles here, place the leg evenly in the middle is ideal. So you're just going through a sequence. Okay, and we'll talk about an exercise, how to do that in a minute. The first part of the exercise is just to be walking over the trot pole. So, you know, have your rider coming in, have them approaching the trot pole at right angles, maintaining the walk, keeping their, 2 point position, 3 point position, eyes up, heels down, lower leg on the horse, and just thinking about focusing on all the things you should be doing coming into a jump. Okay, so once you've got the walk established, then it's a fairly easy exercise just to go on and get the trot established. So walking and trotting over one single pole. Now another thing is, don't put the pole on the outside fence. 2 reasons, partly because your horse tends to drift to the outside track if you're going near the outside fence, and that means the horse is not going to be jumping over the middle of the pole, which is what you want the rider to do. The other thing is, if the rider doesn't have the control to be keeping the horse off the outside fence and riding, say, down the 3/4 line and over the pole, then you've probably got to go back and do some more groundwork before you get them going over the trot poles. Okay. Done your walk and trot, it's a little bit contentious now. Some people say don't put 2 poles on the ground at the same time and get your horse to trot over. And the reason is, if you think of your trot poles, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you put 1 and 2 together, then it's almost like a ditch, and the horse could come along, and some horses do, they come along trot if they've had some jumping training. oh, it's a little ditch, I'll just pop over that, and the horse has jumped it. And this is a rider who may not have cantered before. You don't want them coming trot, 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 jumping and saying, oh, that was a bit scary, I don't think I like doing trot poles anymore. And the same thing is if you've got, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, you have them in 1 and 3, the horse can very easily come along and just pop in a little bounce between 1 and 3. The best way to do it, if you are putting 2 poles on the ground in trot, is to go 1 and 4. And then that way, even if a horse did pop over, they're far less likely, even if they did pop over the first one, then they've pretty much got to put a trot stride in to get to the next one, and they learn from that. Okay, so 1 and 4. Another way to introduce that, the sequence of trot poles, is to return to walk and put 3 walk poles in. So once your horse is walking calmly over the 3 walk poles, the rider's happy going over the 3 walk poles, then you can increase it, and you've got to shorten the distance, of course, for the walk poles. You've got to look at that. But then once your rider is going quite happily over the 3 walk poles, they can go over the 3 trot poles. Now, talking about distances, and I said, develop your eye about the distances. What you can do if you do the 1 and 4 is make sure that your horse puts in 1, 2, 3 steps in there as they go through. And if they're putting in 4 steps or 2 steps or 5 steps, then adjust the distance accordingly. If you've got a group of riders, and particularly if you've got big horses and little horses, it's quite possible that you might set up 2 separate exercises, one for the smaller horses, one for the bigger horses. So you've got your 3 walk steps, then you go into 3 walk poles, then you go into your 3 trot poles, and once you've got your 3 trot poles, the horse is going over both ways, on the right rein, the left rein, then it's fairly easily introduce the 4th one. Now, so long as everything's going okay, it should either be, you should have an even number of poles, ideally, either 4 or 6. If the horse is going well over the 4, introduce the 6. If 4's the extent of your lesson or the extent of your resources, just do 4. That's fine. So hopefully you've learnt a bit there about sequencing the trot poles, how to introduce the sequence, and a little bit about distances, and also to when to start teaching the trot poles, and this is teaching to the rider. The horses can go through a very similar sequence. You might find that the horses learn a bit quicker than the rider because the horse is already used to being ridden, whereas the rider might be a rider that rides once a week, once a fortnight, and they just sort of do a little bit to keep fit, and they're not able, they need more rest periods than what the horse does. Okay, remember I'm Glenys Cox, and from Horse Chats, which is a podcast about where I interview equine industry experts and also International Horse College. If you're interested in becoming an instructor or doing one of the many courses that we've got there, have a look, internationalhorsecollege.com. Instructor courses, I think we've got 6 courses from $62 a week. Have a look there, but remember to like this post, share the post, and if you've got any other questions about lesson plans, sequencing, how to teach your beginner, focus on beginner riders, but your novice riders, your riding school, or your competition riders. Either way, just send me an email or send us a message on this page. There's plenty of ways to contact me. Just go to either one of those websites, horsechats.com or internationalhorsecollege.com, and let me know, or else ask on this page. Talk to you soon.